My name is Ernestine, and I'm 30 years old. Growing up, my sister Sophia and I were inseparable. So imagine my shock when I discovered I wasn't invited to her engagement party. When I confronted my parents, they simply shrugged and said, "It's just a get together." That dismissal broke something in me. I booked a solo trip and left town without telling anyone. Hours later, my phone was flooded with calls from my crying family members. Sometimes it takes disappearing for people to finally see you. Let me know where you're watching from in the comments. If you've ever felt excluded by your own family, hit that like and subscribe button. Now, let me tell you what really happened. I grew up in a modest two-story house in Boston with my parents and my younger sister, Sophia. Despite our 4-year age gap, we were incredibly close throughout our childhood. I can still remember her toddling after me in the backyard, her chubby hands reaching for mine, her eyes full of adoration. "Ernie," she'd call me, unable to pronounce my full name, Ernestine. I didn't mind the nickname when it came from her. Our parents, Robert and Martha Wilson, were hardworking middle-class people. Dad was an accountant at a local firm, and Mom taught second grade at the elementary school a few blocks from our house. They provided us with a stable, comfortable life, though luxuries were rare and had to be saved for. They instilled in us the value of education, hard work, and family loyalty. For years, Sophia and I shared not just a bedroom, but our dreams, fears, and secrets. I helped her with homework, taught her how to apply makeup, and listened to her practice for school presentations. When neighborhood kids teased her about her braces, I was the one who stood up for her. When she had nightmares, I was the one whose bed she crawled into. Everything changed when Sophia entered high school. Almost overnight, my awkward little sister blossomed into someone I barely recognized. She shot up several inches. Her braces came off, revealing a perfect smile, and she developed a confidence I had never managed to find for myself. By 16, she was crowned homecoming queen, something I had never even dreamed of during my own high school years. While I had been a solid B student who participated in chess club and yearbook committee, Sophia became class president, captain of the debate team, and founder of a community service organization that gained recognition from the mayor. My parents' pride was palpable. Our living room slowly transformed into a shrine to Sophia's achievements: trophies, certificates, newspaper clippings, and photos of her shaking hands with local dignitaries. I was proud of my sister too, but I couldn't help noticing how our parents' attention had shifted. When I announced I'd been accepted to the local community college, Mom said, "That's nice, dear," before immediately turning to discuss Sophia's upcoming speech competition. When Sophia later received a full scholarship to Harvard, my parents threw her a party and invited the entire extended family. It wasn't that they were cruel or deliberately dismissive of me. It was more subtle than that: a gradual reorientation of the family's focus and energy toward Sophia's star power. I was the reliable one, the steady one, the one they didn't need to worry about. Sophia was their chance at vicarious glory. After college, I secured a job as an administrative assistant at a marketing firm in downtown Boston. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid the bills and offered potential for growth. I rented a small one-bedroom apartment about 20 minutes from my parents' house and settled into a quiet, independent life. Meanwhile, Sophia graduated with honors from Harvard and immediately landed a prestigious position at a management consulting firm. Despite the growing distance between us, I made efforts to maintain our relationship. We met for coffee every other week, and I called her regularly to check in. She was always friendly, if somewhat distracted, often cutting our conversations short to attend networking events or client meetings. I understood. She was building her career, and that took time and energy. Then Thomas entered the picture. Sophia met him at a charity gala. He was on the organizing committee, the son of a prominent Boston family, with connections in politics and old money. Their courtship was swift and intense. Within 6 months, he had become a fixture at family dinners. Thomas was handsome, well-educated, and unfailingly polite, but something about the way he casually mentioned his family's summer home in the Hamptons or his recent trip to Monaco made me feel inadequate in ways I couldn't articulate. My parents were enchanted by Thomas. Dad would save articles about Thomas's family business to discuss with him, and Mom began dropping hints about wedding venues and grandchildren. When Thomas was around, everyone seemed to sit up straighter, laugh a little louder, try a little harder. Through it all, I continued showing up for Sunday dinners, bringing store-bought desserts that paled in comparison to the gourmet pastries Thomas often arrived with. I listened to stories about Sophia, and Thomas's glamorous life, smiled at the right moments, and tried to ignore the growing feeling that I was becoming a supporting character in my own family story. The week before everything fell apart, I received some good news of my own. After 3 years of taking night classes to earn my marketing certification, I had finally been promoted to junior marketing manager. It came with a significant raise and an actual office instead of a cubicle. I was proud of myself. I had worked hard for this, putting in long hours and sacrificing weekends. I was excited to share the news with my family at our upcoming Sunday dinner, hoping that for once the conversation might center around my achievement. Little did I know that this Sunday dinner would change everything about my relationship with my family. The day of the fateful dinner arrived with beautiful spring weather sunshine spilling over the blooming dogwood trees in my parents' front yard. I parked my sensible Honda Civic behind my father's Buick and gathered my contribution for dinner, a bottle of champagne I'd splurged on to celebrate my promotion. As soon as I walked through the front door, I sensed something was different. The house smelled of furniture polish and Mom's expensive candles that she usually saved for special occasions. The good china was set on the dining room table instead of the everyday plates, and there were fresh flowers in the crystal vase that had belonged to my grandmother. "Mom," I called out, making my way to the kitchen. "Need any help?" I found her stirring something on the stove, dressed in a navy blue dress I hadn't seen before, her hair freshly styled. She looked up, seeming almost startled to see me. "Ernestine, is it 6 already? I lost track of time." I glanced at the kitchen clock. "It's actually only 5:30. I came early to help set up." "Oh, that's thoughtful," she said, turning back to the stove. "But everything's under control. Your father's just changing his shirt." I noticed several serving platters I didn't recognize. "New dishes. Just something I picked up for special occasions," she murmured, not meeting my eyes. The doorbell rang before I could ask any more questions. From the kitchen, I heard my mother's phone ring. She answered it quickly, turning her back to me and speaking in low tones. "Yes, the catering is all set for Saturday. No, the flowers will be delivered at noon. Yes, 50 guests total. The Andersons confirmed this morning. Catering 50 guests." I frowned, trying to recall if there was a family event I'd forgotten about. Before I could ask, Dad appeared in the kitchen doorway. "Ernestine, Sophia, and Thomas are here. Come say hello." In the living room, Sophia was radiant in a pale pink dress, her arm linked through Thomas's. He looked polished as always, in what I guessed was a designer suit. They both had the glowing look of people bursting with news. "Ernie," Sophia exclaimed, giving me a quick hug. "You're early." "Thought I'd help Mom," I said, returning her hug. "You look nice. Special occasion." Thomas and Sophia exchanged a look that spoke volumes. "You could say that," Thomas replied with a grin. Throughout dinner, there was an undercurrent of excitement I couldn't quite identify. Mom kept glancing at Sophia with barely contained glee. Dad was unusually talkative, asking Thomas detailed questions about his family's investment strategies. I tried several times to mention my promotion, but each attempt was swallowed by the current of conversation flowing around me. As Mom served dessert, Thomas casually mentioned, "I think we finalized all the arrangements for Saturday. My parents are looking forward to it." "What's happening Saturday?" I asked, genuinely curious. The question dropped like a stone into a pond, creating ripples of awkward silence. Everyone at the table exchanged glances, and I felt a coldness settle in my stomach. After what seemed like an eternity, Sophia cleared her throat. "It's, our engagement celebration. Thomas officially proposed last weekend." I stared at my sister, trying to process this information. "You're engaged. That's wonderful, congratulations," I managed to say, my voice sounding strange to my own ears. "But why am I just hearing about this now, and what celebration on Saturday?" Mom reached across the table to pat my hand. "It's just a get-together, dear. Nothing formal." "A get-together," I repeated, looking from face to face. "For your engagement. Why wasn't I told about this?" Thomas shifted uncomfortably in his chair. while Sophia suddenly became very interested in her dessert plate. "It's mostly for the parents to meet properly," Sophia said finally, "and some of Thomas's family connections, business associates of his father, that sort of thing. Plus a few close friends," Dad added, not meeting my eyes. A terrible suspicion began forming in my mind. Am I invited to this get-together? Another excruciating silence. "Ernestine," Mom said with a sigh that conveyed more annoyance than regret. "It's a sophisticated event. The guest list had to be limited." I noticed her purse on the side table behind her, partially open. Inside, I could see the edge of what looked like formal invitation cards. Without thinking, I stood up and reached for one. "Ernestine," Mom protested, but it was too late. I was already reading the elegantly printed card. "Mr. and Mrs. Robert Wilson request the pleasure of your company at a celebration of the engagement of their daughter, Sophia Elizabeth, to Mr. Thomas James Anderson. Saturday, April 24th at 6 o'clock. The Westbrook Country Club. Black tie optional." I looked up from the card, my hands shaking slightly. This doesn't look like just a get-together to me. This looks like a formal engagement party at a country club with invitations. "Now, Ernestine," Dad began in the placating tone he always used when he thought I was overreacting, "there's no need to make a scene." "I'm not making a scene," I said quietly. "I'm asking a simple question. Why wasn't I invited to my own sister's engagement party?" Dad sighed heavily, exchanging a look with Mom that I couldn't quite interpret. "It's a sophisticated event, Ernestine. We need to make a good impression on Thomas's family." The implication hung in the air, unspoken but clear. I wasn't sophisticated enough. I would embarrass them. I turned to Sophia, hoping for some defense, some explanation that would hurt less. But she just looked uncomfortable, her eyes darting between our parents and Thomas. "I see," I said carefully, placing the invitation back in Mom's purse. "Well, congratulations again on your engagement. I hope the get-together is everything you want it to be." I grabbed my bag and headed for the door, ignoring my mother's calls to come back and be reasonable. The last thing I saw before closing the door was Thomas's confused expression and Sophia's look of guilty relief. I drove home on autopilot, the conversation replaying in my head like a bad movie. By the time I reached my apartment, my shock had given way to a hollow ache in my chest. I wasn't just hurt, I was humiliated. My own family had collectively decided I wasn't good enough to attend my sister's engagement celebration. I kicked off my shoes and collapsed onto my couch, finally allowing the tears to come. Years of subtle slights and dismissals crystallized into this one perfect rejection. I wasn't sophisticated enough. I wouldn't make a good impression. I wasn't important enough to include in a milestone family event. Through my tears, I remembered all the times I had put Sophia first, staying up late to help her with school projects, lending her money when she was between paychecks after college, listening for hours as she debated which job offer to accept. I had been there for every important moment in her life, cheering her on, supporting her, loving her unconditionally. And this was how she repaid that loyalty, by allowing our parents to exclude me from celebrating her engagement. My phone buzzed with a text from Mom. "You're overreacting. Please be mature about this." That text was the breaking point. I threw my phone across the room where it bounced harmlessly off a cushion. Then I opened my laptop, a desperate idea forming in my mind. I needed to escape, not just from my apartment, but from the entire situation, from Boston, from my family, from the suffocating feeling that I would never be enough. I navigated to a travel website and began searching for last-minute deals. Europe. Too many romantic couples. Caribbean, too many families. My cursor hovered over an option I'd never seriously considered before Bali. For years, I'd kept a Pinterest board titled Someday, filled with images of Bali's lush landscapes, ancient temples, and pristine beaches. It had always seemed like an impossible dream, too far away and too expensive. But now, as I scrolled through vacation packages, I noticed a last-minute cancellation deal for a week-long stay at a beachfront resort. The price was still steep, but not impossible, especially considering the bonus for my recent promotion. The promotion no one had let me announce at dinner. I hesitated, the practical side of my brain listing all the reasons this was a terrible idea. It was financially irresponsible. I had only been in my new position for a week. I hadn't researched Bali properly. I didn't have the right clothes or vaccinations or travel adapters. But the wounded part of me didn't care about any of that. It wanted distance. It wanted to prove I could do something dramatic and unexpected. It wanted to disappear while my family celebrated without me. Before I could talk myself out of it, I clicked Book Now and entered my credit card information. The confirmation screen informed me that my flight departed from Boston Logan International Airport at 6:05 a.m. the next morning, less than 8 hours away. A strange calm settled over me as I moved through my apartment, throwing clothes and toiletries into a suitcase. I wrote a brief email to my boss explaining that a family emergency had come up and I needed to take some personal time. It wasn't entirely a lie. My family had indeed created an emergency of sorts. What I didn't do was tell anyone in my family where I was going. No text to Sophia, no call to my parents, nothing. Let them wonder. Let them worry. For once, let me be the one who did something unexpected. I ordered an Uber for 300 a.m. and set my alarm, though I doubted I would sleep much. As I waited for morning to come, I sat on my balcony watching the city lights, feeling a strange mix of terror and exhilaration. I was about to fly halfway around the world alone on an impulse. It was the most un-Ernestine-like thing I had ever done, and that perhaps was exactly why I needed to do it. The journey to Bali was long and exhausting, but strangely peaceful. For 20-plus hours, I was unreachable, suspended between my old life and whatever awaited me. I turned off my phone after sending the email to my boss, relishing the silence, the absence of expectations. On the plane, I watched movies I'd never make time for at home, ate unfamiliar airline food, and stared out the window at cloud formations over oceans I'd never crossed before. There was something liberating about being a stranger in transit, unmoored from my identity as the forgotten daughter, the overlooked sister. When I finally arrived at Denpasar Airport, the humid air hit me like a warm embrace. Everything was new. The melodic cadence of the Indonesian language, the ornate architecture, the riot of tropical flowers. I felt dazed from travel, but oddly alert, as if all my senses had been turned up to maximum volume. A driver from the resort met me at arrivals, holding a sign with my name. Not Wilson, but Ms. Ernestine. And I felt a small thrill at being addressed with respect. The drive to the resort took us through narrow roads flanked by lush vegetation and dotted with temples. Balinese music played softly on the car stereo, and the driver occasionally pointed out landmarks in accented English. The resort exceeded my wildest expectations. My beachfront villa had a private plunge pool, an outdoor shower, and a view of the Indian Ocean that brought tears to my eyes. It was more luxury than I'd ever experienced, and for a moment I felt guilty about the expense. But then I remembered why I was here, because I wasn't sophisticated enough for my sister's engagement party, and the guilt evaporated. After showering away the travel grime, I ventured out to explore the resort. I dined alone at the beachside restaurant, savoring fresh seafood and tropical fruits while watching the sunset paint the sky in impossible shades of pink and orange. For the first time in years, perhaps I was fully present in my own life, not a supporting character in someone else's story. When I returned to my villa, curiosity finally got the better of me. I turned on my phone, bracing myself for the flood of notifications that would surely follow. What I saw exceeded even my expectations. 37 missed calls, 52 text messages, 15 voicemails, emails, Facebook messages, Instagram DMs. My family had apparently tried to reach me through every possible channel. The messages started with annoyance: "Ernestine, you're being childish." "Mom, 8:30 p.m., Sunday. Call your mother, she's worried." "Dad, 9:15 p.m., Sunday." Then progressed to concern: "Hey, are you okay? You're not answering anyone." "Sophia, 10:23 p.m., Sunday. Your boss called us, you took emergency leave." "What's going on?" "Mom, 11:45 a.m., Monday," and finally escalated to panic. "We're filing a police report if we don't hear from you by noon." "Dad, 9:02 a.m., Tuesday. Please call us. We're all worried sick." "Sophia, 10:17 a.m., Tuesday." The last voicemail was from Sophia, her voice broken by sobs. "Ernie, please." I'm so sorry about the party. I should have stood up to Mom and Dad. It was wrong to exclude you. Thomas is furious with me for going along with it. Please, just let us know you're okay. We love you. I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at my phone, feeling a complicated mix of emotions. Part of me felt vindicated. They were finally paying attention to me. Another part felt guilty for causing such worry. But mostly, I felt a strange detachment, as if I were observing someone else's family drama. I composed a brief text to the family group chat. I'm safe, taking some time for myself. Don't try to contact me. We'll reach out when I'm ready. Within seconds, my phone exploded with calls, which I ignored. I silenced the ringer and turned back to the balcony, gazing out at the moonlight dancing on the ocean waves. Just as I was about to turn in for the night, a text came through from my best friend Jillian. Whatever you did has thrown your family into complete chaos. Call me when you can. There's a lot you don't know. Curious, I called her, realizing it would be early morning in Boston. Thank God, she answered immediately. Are you okay? Where are you? I'm fine, I said, surprised by how calm I felt. I'm in Bali. Bali! Jillian practically screeched. As in Indonesia. You flew to the other side of the world without telling anyone? Yep. I couldn't help the small smile that formed. It's beautiful here. Girl, you have no idea what you've done, do you? Your disappearing act has caused a complete meltdown in your family. What do you mean? Jillian took a deep breath. So after you left Sunday night, your parents just thought you were being dramatic. Sophia felt bad but was busy with last-minute party arrangements. But then you didn't show up for work on Monday, and your boss called your emergency contact. Your mom. Oh, I said, feeling a twinge of guilt about involving my workplace. Yeah, that's when they started getting worried. They went to your apartment Monday night and saw your suitcase was gone, clothes missing, passport not in your drawer. They thought maybe you'd gone to stay with a friend, so they started calling around. When no one had seen you, they really freaked out. I could hear Jillian shuffling papers in the background. She worked early shifts at a publishing house. Then came the engagement party yesterday, she continued. It was apparently a disaster. Your parents were distracted checking their phones constantly. Sophia was a mess. Then Thomas's mother asked where your sister was, and the whole story came out. How they'd excluded you from the party, how you'd vanished. Wait, I interrupted. Thomas's mother asked about me. She doesn't even know me. Apparently, Thomas had told his parents all about you. He was looking forward to introducing you to them. When his mother found out what had happened, she was appalled. She pulled Thomas aside and asked what kind of family excludes their own daughter from an important celebration. It caused this huge scene. I sat down heavily on the bed. What happened next? Thomas confronted Sophia about going along with excluding you. She broke down crying in front of everyone, telling Thomas she'd been trying to please your parents her whole life and didn't know how to stand up to them. Then she turned on your parents and accused them of always favoring her over you, in ways that made her uncomfortable. She said that, I whispered, hardly believing what I was hearing. In front of 50 guests from Boston's elite social circle, Jillian confirmed. Thomas's father suggested they postpone any wedding plans until the family worked through their obvious issues. Your mother was mortified. Your father tried to defend their decision, saying something about how they were just trying to present the family's best face. And Thomas's father asked if that meant hiding family members they were ashamed of. I winced at that, the words hitting too close to home. The party basically imploded, Jillian concluded. Half the guests left early. Thomas's parents took him and Sophia aside for a private conversation. Your parents went home alone and have apparently been fighting ever since. I stared at the ceiling, trying to process all this information. My absence had created more impact than my presence ever could have. There's one more thing, Jillian added. Thomas has apparently been asking about you since he and Sophia started dating. He told her he admired how you worked your way up at your company without any family connections or Ivy League degree. He thought you were the more grounded, authentic Wilson. I laughed, a short surprise sound. That's unexpected. Yeah. Well, your family is in shambles, wondering where you are and if you're safe. Your text just confirmed you're alive, but they're still freaking out. Good, I said, surprising myself with the firmness in my voice. Let them freak out a little longer. I need this time away. I get that, Jillian said softly. Just take care of yourself, okay? And maybe check in occasionally so I know you haven't been eaten by a tiger or something. There are no tigers in Bali, I informed her, though I wasn't actually sure about that. But I'll check in, promise. After hanging up, I stood on the balcony for a long time, listening to the rhythm of the waves and thinking about what Jillian had told me. My impulsive escape had forced a confrontation that was perhaps long overdue. For the first time, the Wilson family's carefully maintained facade had cracked, revealing the dysfunctional dynamics beneath. I turned off my phone again and slipped into bed, falling asleep to the sound of the ocean and the unfamiliar calls of tropical birds. Whatever happened next with my family, I had given myself this gift: a week to rediscover who Ernestine Wilson was when she wasn't defined by her family's expectations. The next 7 days in Bali became a journey of self-discovery. I never expected. Each morning I woke to the sound of waves and birdsong, stepping out onto my balcony to witness breathtaking sunrises that painted the sky in watercolor hues. There was something profoundly healing about being so far from home, surrounded by beauty that had nothing to do with social status or family connections. I intentionally kept my phone off most of the time, turning it on only briefly each evening to send Jillian a quick "still alive" text and check my work email. I ignored the continuing stream of messages from my family, not yet ready to engage with their emotions or demands. On my second day, I joined a small group tour to several local temples. Our guide, a middle-aged Balinese man named Wayan, shared not just the history of each site, but also insights into Balinese philosophy and spirituality. At Tirta Empul, a water temple where pilgrims come to purify themselves in sacred springs, Wayan explained the concept of Trihita Karana, the three causes of well-being: harmony with God, harmony with people, and harmony with nature. Many visitors come to Bali looking for something, Wayan told me when he noticed me lingering at the temple long after the rest of the group had moved on. Sometimes they do not know what they seek, but the island knows. I smiled politely, not ready to share my story with a stranger. But his words stayed with me as we continued our tour, visiting rice terraces that cascaded down hillsides like giant green staircases, and small villages where artisans practiced traditional crafts passed down through generations. On the third day, I ventured beyond the resort on my own, renting a scooter despite never having driven one before. After a few wobbly starts in the resort's parking lot, I gained enough confidence to navigate the narrow roads to a nearby beach town. There was something exhilarating about the freedom of movement, the warm wind in my face, the ability to stop whenever something caught my eye. I found a small cafe overlooking the ocean and settled in with a book I'd purchased at the airport. Something light and escapist that had nothing to do with family dynamics or personal growth. But as I sipped my iced coffee, I found myself drawn into conversation with two women at the next table, sisters from Australia who were in Bali for a yoga retreat. "We do this every year," explained the older one, Megan. "A week away from husbands' kids' jobs, just to reconnect with ourselves and each other." "That sounds wonderful," I said, a pang of envy hitting me as I thought about my own sister. "It hasn't always been easy," admitted the younger sister, Kate. "We went through a rough patch a few years back. Competitive as hell, weren't we, Meg?" Megan nodded. "Our parents played favorites something terrible, always comparing us, setting us against each other. Took us years to realize we were taking out our frustration on each other instead of addressing the real problem." "Which was?" I asked, suddenly very interested. "Parents with their own unresolved issues," Kate said simply. "Once we figured that out and started setting boundaries with them, our relationship improved dramatically." I found myself sharing parts of my own story with these strangers. The years of feeling overshadowed the engagement party exclusion, my impulsive escape to Bali. They listened without judgment, occasionally nodding in recognition. "Good for you," Megan said when I finished. "Sometimes you have to make a big statement to get people to pay attention. The question is, what do you want to happen now?" It was a question I hadn't fully considered. What did I want? An apology seemed obvious, but beyond that, did I want a complete restructuring of family dynamics that had been in place for decades? Was that even possible? The sisters invited me to join them for a sunset yoga class on the beach, and though I'd never done yoga before, I accepted. As I moved through unfamiliar poses with the sound of waves in the background, I found my mind quieting for the first time since I'd left Boston. By the final savasana lying on my back, with the last rays of sun warming my face, I felt a clarity I hadn't experienced in years. What I wanted wasn't just acknowledgement of this particular slight, but recognition of a pattern that had shaped my entire adult life. I wanted my parents to see me, truly see me, not as Sophia's less impressive sister, but as a person with my own strengths and accomplishments. I wanted Sophia to recognize her role in perpetuating our parents' favoritism by accepting its benefits without questioning its costs. And I wanted to stop seeking validation from people who might never be capable of giving it in the way I needed. The following days brought more encounters that seemed almost cosmically designed to help me process my situation. At a local market, I met an elderly Balinese woman selling intricate hand-woven baskets. When I admired her work, she invited me to sit with her while she demonstrated her technique. "Very difficult, very patient," she said in limited English, her gnarled fingers moving with surprising dexterity. "Many years to learn," she told me through a combination of broken English and expressive gestures that she had been weaving since she was a child. Her daughters had moved to the city for better opportunities, but she remained in her village preserving traditions they had no interest in continuing. "They have different path," she said, shrugging. "Not better, not worse. Different." There was such acceptance in her voice, such peace with the choices her children had made, even when those choices took them away from her way of life. I wondered if my parents were capable of that kind of acceptance, of seeing different paths as equally valid, rather than ranking them according to some invisible scorecard of social success. By the end of my week in Bali, I had filled a journal with reflections, spent hours in meditation on the beach, and had conversations with travelers from around the world who shared stories of their own family conflicts and resolutions. I had climbed a volcano for sunrise, swum in a waterfall, and learned to make a traditional Balinese offering of flowers and incense. Somewhere along the way, the hurt and anger that had propelled me across the world began to transform into something more constructive, a determination to create boundaries that would protect my well-being, while still allowing for the possibility of reconciliation. On my last night in Bali, I sat on my balcony watching a spectacular thunderstorm over the ocean. Lightning illuminated the sky in brilliant flashes, followed by thunder that seemed to vibrate through my body. It was beautiful and terrifying and completely beyond human control, much like the emotions that had brought me here. I turned on my phone, and for the first time since arriving, read through all the messages from my family. The tone had evolved from anger to fear to regret to finally something that resembled understanding. The most recent text from Sophia simply read, "I don't blame you for leaving. I'm just hoping you'll give us a chance to make things right when you're ready. I love you, Ernie." Taking a deep breath, I booked my return flight to Boston for the following evening. It was time to go home and face whatever waited for me there. But I would be returning as a different Ernestine than the one who had fled. Stronger, clearer about what I needed, and no longer willing to accept less than I deserved from the people who claimed to love me. The Boston air felt cold and familiar as I stepped out of Logan International Airport, pulling my suitcase behind me. I had texted Jillian from my layover in Dubai, asking her to keep my arrival time to herself. I wasn't ready for a dramatic airport reunion with my family. I needed a night to decompress and prepare for what would inevitably be an emotional confrontation. But as I approached the taxi stand, I heard someone call my name. Turning, I saw them all there. Mom, Dad, Sophia, and even Thomas, standing awkwardly by the curb holding a handmade sign that read, "Welcome home, Ernestine." For a moment, I considered turning around and booking the next flight back to Bali, but I took a deep breath, remembering all the insights I'd gained during my week away. Running again wouldn't solve anything. It was time to face this head on. As I walked toward them, I noticed how different they looked. Mom's eyes were puffy from crying. Dad seemed to have aged years in just a week, and Sophia was fidgeting nervously with her engagement ring. Only Thomas appeared calm, watching me with what seemed like genuine curiosity and respect. Mom reached me first, arms outstretched for a hug that I accepted stiffly. "Oh, Ernestine," she sobbed against my shoulder. We were so worried. How could you just disappear like that? I gently disentangled myself from her embrace. I think the better question is, how could you exclude me from Sophia's engagement party? Dad stepped forward, his expression a mixture of relief and lingering annoyance. We can discuss all that at home. Let's not do this in the airport. Actually, Thomas interjected, surprising everyone. Maybe we should give Ernestine some space. She's just had a long flight and probably needs rest. I shot him a grateful look. Thank you, Thomas. I was planning to go to my apartment tonight. I'll drive you, Sophia offered immediately. Please, I really need to talk to you. After a moment's hesitation, I agreed. We made awkward arrangements. Sophia would take me home, my parents would go back to their house, and we would all meet for lunch the following day. Thomas squeezed Sophia's hand supportively before leaving with my parents. The car ride with Sophia was initially silent. She kept glancing at me as if afraid I might vanish again if she looked away too long. You got a tan, she finally said. It looks nice. Bali will do that to you, I replied, unable to keep a small note of pride from my voice. The fact that I had spontaneously flown to Indonesia still seemed somewhat surreal even to me. Sophia took a deep breath. Ernie, I am so sorry. I knew excluding you from the party was wrong. I should have stood up to Mom and Dad. Yes, you should have. I agreed. But this isn't just about the party, Sophia. It's about years of being treated like I'm less important, less worthy of attention and celebration. And it's about you accepting that treatment as normal. She flinched, but didn't deny it. I know. I've always known on some level. But it was easier to go along with it because it benefited me. She paused at a red light, turning to look at me directly. The night you disappeared, when we realized you were really gone, and not just avoiding our calls, I've never been so scared. And then at the party, when everything fell apart, I finally saw how toxic this whole dynamic has been. What happened at the party? I asked, curious to hear her version. Sophia laughed humorlessly. Total disaster. Thomas's mother asked about you, and when Dad gave some vague answer, Thomas mentioned how much he'd been looking forward to introducing you to his parents. That's when it all came out. How you weren't invited, how you disappeared afterward. She shook her head, remembering. Thomas was horrified. His parents were even worse. His mother actually asked what kind of family excludes their own daughter from celebrations. Dad tried to defend the decision, saying something about family image that made everything worse. I just broke, started crying in front of everyone, then screamed at Mom and Dad about how they've always made me complicit in hurting you. We pulled up outside my apartment building, but neither of us made a move to get out of the car. Thomas wanted to cancel the engagement, Sophia continued quietly. He said he couldn't marry into a family that treated their own this way. That's when I realized I could lose everything. You, him, the future I'd planned. All because I hadn't had the courage to do the right thing. I studied my sister's face, noting the dark circles under her eyes, the strain around her mouth. Are you and Thomas okay now? She nodded. He's been amazing, actually. Said he'd support whatever I needed to do to make things right with you. He really admires you, you know. Has since I first told him about you. He thinks it's incredible how you've built your career from the ground up, no connections, no shortcuts. This aligned with what Jillian had told me, but hearing it from Sophia made it more real. That's nice to hear. We postponed any wedding plans, Sophia added. Thomas thinks we need to work on family relationships first, and he's right. She hesitated, then asked, Do you think you can ever forgive me? I considered this carefully. I think so, but things can't go back to the way they were, Sophia. I won't accept being the family afterthought anymore. You shouldn't have to, she agreed quickly. None of us realized how much we were hurting you until you were gone. It was like suddenly there was this Ernestine-shaped hole in our lives, and we could finally see the outline of what we'd been taking for granted. We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of years of unspoken hurt between us. I'm proud of you, you know, Sophia said suddenly. Flying to Bali alone was badass. I could never do something like that. I smiled my first genuine smile since seeing my family at the airport. Actually, I think you could. There's a lot we don't know about each other, isn't there? Maybe it's time we changed that. The next morning, I met with my parents at a neutral location. a cafe halfway between their house and my apartment. I arrived early, securing a table by the window and ordering a coffee to steady my nerves. When they walked in, I was struck again by how deflated they looked, as if my disappearance had punctured some illusion they'd been maintaining. The conversation was difficult. Dad initially tried to minimize the situation, suggesting I had overreacted to a simple misunderstanding. Mom vacillated between tearful apologies and defensive explanations about social obligations and impression management. "I don't think you understand what's at stake," she argued at one point. "Thomas's family has connections that could benefit all of us, including you." "What I understand," I replied calmly, "is that you were willing to hide your own daughter to impress people you barely know. What does that say about your values?" Dad shifted uncomfortably. "We never meant to hurt you, Ernestine. We just thought, well, you've never been interested in those kinds of social events." "You never asked," I pointed out. "You assumed. You've been assuming things about me for years, fitting me into this narrative of the plain, unremarkable daughter who doesn't quite measure up. Have you ever actually asked me about my life? My accomplishments, my dreams?" Their silence was answer enough. "I got promoted the week before Sophia's party," I told them. "Junior marketing manager. I worked nights and weekends for 3 years to earn that certification, paid for it myself, all while doing my regular job. I brought champagne to Sunday dinner to celebrate, but no one even let me share my news." Mom's eyes widened. "We had no idea." "Because you never asked," I repeated. "Sophia sneezes and gets a parade. I reshape my entire career trajectory and you don't even notice." Dad looked genuinely troubled. "Have we really been that blind?" "Yes," I said simply. "And I've let it happen. That's on me. But I'm not letting it happen anymore." We talked for hours, moving from the initial hurt of the party exclusion to deeper patterns of favoritism and neglect. There were moments of breakthrough, Dad admitting he'd always found it easier to connect with Sophia because she reminded him of his beloved sister Mom, acknowledging that she lived vicariously through Sophia's social success because of her own insecurities. There were also moments of frustrating disconnect times when they still didn't seem to fully grasp the impact of their behavior. But they were trying, and that was a start. By the time we parted, we had agreed to try family therapy. Mom had made preliminary calls while I was in Bali, finding a therapist who specialized in family systems and adult parent-child relationships. Our first appointment was scheduled for the following week. The first therapy session was revelatory and painful in equal measure. Dr. Levine, a compassionate but no-nonsense woman in her 50s, created a space where we could all speak honestly without interruption or defense. She guided us through exercises that exposed the deeply rooted patterns in our family. Mom's obsession with social status stemming from her own childhood poverty. Dad's unconscious resentment of me for not being as academically gifted as his sister had been. Sophia's crippling fear of disappointing anyone. My own complicity in accepting the role of family wallflower. "Families create dances," Dr. Levine explained. "Unconscious patterns of interaction that become so familiar, no one questions them anymore. The good news is, once you see the dance, you can choose to change the steps." Over the following months, we learned new steps, stumbling often, but gradually finding a more balanced rhythm. Mom made efforts to show interest in my work, though she sometimes still slipped into old patterns of comparing me unfavorably to Sophia. Dad and I discovered shared interests in photography and hiking that gave us new ways to connect. Sophia and I established a weekly sister dinner, just the two of us, creating space to rebuild our relationship outside the family dynamic. Thomas, true to his word, insisted on getting to know me better before resuming wedding plans. We discovered a shared love of obscure documentaries and spicy food, developing a friendship independent of his relationship with Sophia. He confided that he had always felt uncomfortable with the way my parents sidelined me, but hadn't known how to address it without overstepping. 6 months after my Bali escape, Sophia and Thomas announced they were ready to move forward with wedding plans. This time, Sophia asked me to be her maid of honor, in a private conversation over coffee, tears in her eyes, as she expressed how much it would mean to her. "Are you sure?" I asked, remembering all too well the comments about sophistication and making good impressions. "Mom might prefer someone more polished." Sophia reached for my hand. "Mom doesn't get a vote this time. This is my wedding, and I want my sister standing beside me. Besides, she added with a grin, you're the one who's been to Bali. Pretty sure that makes you the sophisticated one now. The wedding was beautiful, smaller and more intimate than the engagement party would have suggested, with meaningful touches that reflected who Sophia and Thomas really were, not who our parents wanted them to be. As I stood beside my sister, watching her exchange vows with a man who had prioritized family healing over social appearances, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't expected to find so soon. At the reception, Thomas's mother sought me out, champagne glass in hand. I've been looking forward to properly meeting you, she said. Thomas speaks very highly of you. That's kind of him, I replied, bracing for the usual comparison to Sophia. Instead, she surprised me. He admires your authenticity, says you're the real deal in a world of smoke and mirrors. She glanced meaningfully toward where my parents were charming some business associates, a rare quality in our circles. The months since my return from Bali had brought other changes too. My promotion had led to new responsibilities at work, including managing my own team on a rebranding project. I'd maintained my newfound love of yoga, finding a studio near my apartment that offered classes with a Balinese-trained instructor. I'd even started dating someone, a graphic designer I met through work who appreciated my directness and had no connection to Boston's social elite. My relationship with my parents remained a work in progress. There were still moments of frustration, still times when old patterns threatened to reassert themselves. But the difference was that now we all recognized them when they appeared. The unconscious had become conscious, and that made real change possible. The most profound change, though, was within myself. That impulsive trip to Bali had awakened something in me, a recognition of my own strength, my own worth, independent of family validation. I had flown halfway around the world alone, navigated a foreign country, and returned with a clearer sense of who I was and what I deserved. Sometimes you have to disappear to be truly seen. Sometimes the greatest act of love is not accommodation, but honest confrontation. And sometimes the family you need is the one you help create through painful but necessary truth-telling. Have you ever had to create distance from your family to be truly appreciated? Share your experience in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to hear more stories of family healing and self-discovery. Don't forget to share this video with someone who might need to hear that sometimes walking away is the first step toward coming home. Thank you for listening to my story, and may you find the courage to speak your truth, even when your voice shakes.